Today, we're going to go over Maxxis mountain bike tires for enduro riding and racing. To start out, all the enduro tires I will be riding and reviewing will be foldable tires, not wire beads. Wire beads are usually used for more downhill applications. So while we're on the topic of foldable tires, Maxxis has two different types of casing for their foldable tires. So we have double down and we have exo protection casing. So exo protection is a thinner casing than double down. Double down is basically a downhill tire without the wire bead. So basically a double down casing is almost twice the thickness of an exo. That's why they kind of call it the double down. So lately, you'll find that Maxxis tires will have a wide trail option. It'll be monikered by the WT next to the tire size. WT means that the rim size it's specifically designed for will be 35 millimeters, but I would run it on any tire from like a 30 millimeter or up. Where you would want the non-wide trail casing is if you had a rim smaller than 30 millimeters, say like a TT Swiss 471 with a 25 mil inner width, you'd want to run a non-wide trail casing. Most Maxxis tires will come in 3 compounds to choose from. You can get the Max Terra, Max Grip, and Max Speed. Max Speed will be your fastest rolling, less tread wear design, and then Max Terra is kind of your average wearing tire. It's the intermediate compound. It still grips really well and gives you a little bit better tread wear than the Max Grip. The Max Grip will be a very soft compound, so super grippy, but it will wear out a lot faster. So for most riders, you're probably best off going with the Max Terra compound. So TPI isn't something I necessarily look at when I'm buying a tire because it matters, but really doesn't matter that much. TPI stands for threads per inch, and what you'll need to know is 60 versus 120 threads per inch. If you have 120 TPI, the tire casing will be a little bit more supple and a little less durable, whereas a 60 TPI will be a little bit more durable, but it will have a little stiffer casing, so it won't be as compliant with the ground. All the tires I'll be talking about today are tubeless ready. That's kind of the only way to go if you're riding or racing enduro mountain bikes. The tire sizes I'll be covering today are between 2.3 inches and 2.5 inches. For aggressive riding, I feel like going any bigger than a 2.5, the tire gets a little squirmish, and if you go below a 2.3, you're sacrificing grip. So that's why I kind of stay between those 3. There is a trend towards bigger tires called plus tires that can go from 2.6 to 3.0. But I just don't find that style of riding works for me personally, so I won't be talking about those today. Now we're going to go through 5 of Maxxis' best enduro tires. So the Maxxis Minion DHF is one of my all-time favorite mountain bike tires. So DHF stands for downhill front. So it's going to be primarily a front tire. It can be used as both, but it's meant to perform best as a front tire. It's my go-to tire for 90% of my mountain bike needs. It's definitely a better dry tire than mud, but it works in pretty much any condition all year round. It lasts a long time. It comes in those 3 compounds I talked about earlier. It has a pretty good wear life. For me, I'm riding maybe 5 times a week and it will last me upwards of a month to 2 months, and that's aggressive use, so for most people it will last quite a bit. It's available in double down and extra protection sidewalls, so whatever your needs, it will have it. The Maxxis Minion DHR 2 stands for downhill rear, and it's also the second iteration of this tire. So I think it's a pretty good tire. I've seen people use it in the front and the rear. It's specifically made for the rear. It has really good braking knobs, and it's got the same cornering knobs as a DHF. It's not my favorite tire. It's very similar to a Highroller in my opinion, but it doesn't really clear dirt as well, and I don't know, it's basically a Highroller in my opinion. It's a Highroller, but it lasts a little bit longer than a Highroller, because a Highroller is a very fast wearing tire. So this is a good staple. You can run it front and rear and it will last the longest of probably any of the tires in the whole lineup. It comes in double down and exo protection sidewalls. So this is the Maxxis Highroller 2. It's the second iteration of the Highroller, and contrary to popular belief, it doesn't really roll that fast, even though it's called the Highroller. What I really like it for is a little bit wetter conditions, and it's really good under braking. And it has similar cornering knobs to a DHF and a DHR, so it does really well. The biggest downside is that it doesn't come in a double down casing, so it's not really a tire I would race, just because it's not as durable. It might flat a little bit easier. But basically the other downside to Highroller 2 is that it wears out a little faster than most tires. It rarely will last me a month, which is pretty bad. They're not the cheapest tire on the markets. It's a good tire that can be run front and rear, but primarily I choose to run it in the rear. So next up, we're talking about the Maxxis Shorty tire. I know I said the DHF was one of my favorites, but this has to be a close second. Every time you put it on, you know you're gonna have a good time. So this tire is meant for muddy conditions or loam. It's basically a cut mud spike. So it's kind of an iteration of the Maxxis Wet Scream, but there's very little circumstances where you need a full-on gnarly mud tire. Everyone was cutting their Wet Screams down, so they ended up making the Shorty. Shorty means that it's a shorter mud spike. So basically it clears mud super well. It grips in the worst of conditions. This tire definitely could wear out fast if you're riding it in less ideal conditions, like hard pack conditions or on the road for a bit. But if you're sticking fully to the muddy trails, it should last you quite a bit of time. I primarily would run it as a front tire, but if conditions are that bad, you would definitely run them front and rear in a muddy race or muddy ride. The Maxxis Shorty is available on exo protection sidewalls and double downs. So the last tire I'm going to be talking about is the Maxxis Aggressor. It's basically only used as a rear tire, but I have seen it run on the front, so it's up to you, but I definitely run it on the rear. It comes in a double down and an extra protection casing. I run it in the 2.3 size. I think that's the only size it comes in. It's definitely a faster rolling tread, very tight knit, so it doesn't clear mud as well as most of the other tires on the market. Has a really good cornering knob, similar to the Minion DHF, and basically it's just the go-to rear tire for 90% of conditions, kind of like the DHF. It's just, it rolls really fast. The braking isn't too terrible. It looks like it'd be worse, but honestly it feels similar to that DHR I was talking about earlier. It doesn't seem like it sacrifices that much in braking, but you get a really fast rolling tire. It grips amazingly in dry conditions. Dry, loose, just as long as it's not muddy, you're pretty much good with the Aggressor. It's a great tire, and as it comes in double down casing, you can hit it really hard in your back wheel and you won't experience a lot of punctures. So this is one of my go-to rear tires for enduro racing. The Aggressor is probably the best wearing of the entire group. So my go-to tires for 90% of enduro riding and racing are the Minion DHF and the Aggressor. The Minion front and the Aggressor rear. This Minion DHF, I run a 2.5, and I run it in the 3C Max Terra compound. Also, I run the Exo Protection sidewall because I'm using it as a front tire. So the Aggressor 2.3 and the double down sidewall is my go-to rear tire. I feel like for almost all conditions it works. I rarely ride in the mud, and when I do, I'll be switching my tires up. So this runs 90% of the year. I run it in bike parks, I run it on my local trail centers, everything. It feels great. And so the setup I run maybe 10% of the time. When it's really wet and muddy, will have to be the Highroller 2 in the rear and the Shorty in the front. So the Highroller 2, I'll run in a 2.4 in a 3C Max Terra compound. Unfortunately, they don't make a double down, so I will be using the Exo Protection casing in the rear. To pair with the Highroller 2, I run a Maxxis Shorty in the front. I run it in a 2.5 inch tire with the 3C Max Terra casing. I would rather run a Max Grip, but they didn't have one in stock right now. Obviously I'm running it Tubeless Ready, and you can just tell by the look of the tire, it's beefy, it grips, and it's just a good time when it's on there. So those were the two setups I normally run. The Minion DHF and the Aggressor for the dry, and for the wet, I'll be running the Highroller 2 and the Shorty. So we've covered the specifications of the Maxxis tire lineup for enduro riding. We've also covered the 5 models that I prefer to use. If you have any other tires you prefer, you can feel free to share those in the comments, and maybe we can have a discussion about them. Thanks for coming along on my breakdown of the Maxxis tire lineup for enduro riding. If you liked this video and thought it was informative, give it a thumbs up. Definitely comment below. I'd love to see what tires you guys are running, and I'd love to have a discussion about it. I'll see you guys out on the trails.
No.